Eala returns to Manila after Australian Open run fresh off her Australian Open main draw debut. Filipina tennis player Alex Eala is back in Manila. Reflecting on her Australian Open experience, Eala called it a milestone moment. Being able to play here is such a privilege. One that must be earned, but a privilege nonetheless. Learning, growing and enjoying. Thank you, Melbourne. She wrote that in singles. The 20-year-old bowed out in the opening round following a 3-set battle against world number 100 Alicia Parks, falling 6-0, 3-6, 2-6. Despite the result, the match on court 6 featured a vocal Filipino crowd that rallied behind Eala throughout. She also saw action in doubles, teaming up with Brazil's Ingrid Martins, but the pair were eliminated by Japan's Shuko Aoyama and Poland's Magda Linette. Fans are now looking ahead to her next stop, with expectations that Eala could receive a wild-card entry at the WTA 125 Philippines Open, potentially marking her first competitive appearance on home soil this season. Homecoming on warm concrete. Eala returns to Manila. The plane dipped through a quilt of clouds and suddenly there it was, the familiar sprawl of Manila, stitched together by rivers, roads, and memory. From the window, the city looked like it always had, sun-warmed concrete, flashes of tin roofs, the glint of the Pasig threading its way through the noise. For Alex Eala, the view carried a different weight this time. She wasn't just coming home. She was returning changed. Australia still clung to her bones, the sharp blue of Melbourne mornings, the clean echo of balls struck on hard courts, the hum of a crowd that rose and fell like a single lung. The Australian Open had been a blur of white lines and long nights, ice baths and early alarms, victories that felt electric and losses that taught their own quiet lessons. Somewhere between the first practice session and the final handshake, something had shifted. Not dramatically, not in a way that could be measured on a scoreboard, but enough that she could feel it now, even as the plane taxied toward the gate at Ninoy Aquino International Airport. The air greeted her like an old friend who hugged too tight. It was thicker here, louder, alive with overlapping conversations and the music of wheels rolling across tile. A small crowd waited beyond the barrier, family first, always family, then a few fans clutching phones, a couple of reporters already rehearsing their questions in their heads. Someone had made a sign. Someone always did. Her mother was the first face she found. It was impossible not to smile then, the kind of smile that starts in the chest and spills outward. The embrace grounded her more than any stretching routine ever could. In that moment, the tournament felt far away, reduced to a series of memories that could be unpacked later. "Welcome home," her mother said, and the words carried more than geography. Outside, Manila moved at its usual pace, jeepneys coughing smoke, motorcycles slicing through traffic with impossible confidence, vendors calling out promises of food and comfort. Alex watched it all from the car window, her racket bag resting against her knee. She had traveled the world chasing points and progress, but this chaos had shaped her first instincts: how to adapt, how to improvise, how to keep going even when the conditions weren't perfect. The days that followed were a gentle collision of rest and responsibility. There were interviews, of course. People wanted to talk about Australia, about pressure, about expectations, about what it felt like to carry a flag onto one of the sport's biggest stages. Alex answered as honestly as she could. She spoke about discipline and patience, about learning to compete point by point instead of dreaming too far ahead. She spoke about the thrill of hearing her name pronounced correctly in a stadium half a world away. And she spoke, always, about home. Between commitments, she found pockets of normalcy. A morning jog before the heat settled in. A plate of food that tasted like childhood. Laughter that didn't need translation. On one quiet afternoon, she returned to a familiar court, paint slightly faded, net a little frayed, the surface marked by years of games played without cameras or crowds. She bounced a ball and listened to its rhythm. It sounded right. The Australian Open had tested her in ways that training never could. There were moments when the match threatened to slip away, when doubt crept in during the long changeovers. In those moments, she had thought of Manila without realizing it, of resilience learned early, of making do with what you had, of fighting for every inch because nothing was guaranteed. The run she made wasn't just a personal milestone. It felt like a conversation between past and present, Between the girl who first picked up a racket and the athlete still becoming herself. Back home, young players began to appear at the edges of her days. Some came shyly, others bold with questions and wide-eyed ambition. They asked about Australia, about the speed of the game, about what it took to belong on those courts. Alex listened carefully. She remembered being on the other side of that conversation, hungry for proof that someone like her could make it. She didn't offer promises. She offered process. Belief, yes, but belief anchored in effort. One evening, as the sun melted into the skyline and the city softened into gold, she stood on a balcony and let the noise wash over her. Manila was never quiet, but it could be comforting in its constancy. She thought about what came next: more tournaments, more travel, more mornings that began before sunrise. The path ahead was long and uncertain, as all real paths are. But it no longer felt abstract. The Australian Open had given her something she couldn't pack into a suitcase: perspective. It had shown her how narrow the margins were at the top, how a single decision, a single shot, could tilt everything. It had also reminded her why she started: because she loved the game, because she loved the challenge, because there was joy in testing herself against the best. As her time in Manila drew to a close, the city did what it always did. It held her briefly, then let her go. At the airport again, she moved with a little more confidence, a little more ease. Home had done its work. It had recharged her, reminded her who she was beyond rankings and results. When the plane lifted off, Alex looked down one last time. The city blurred into patterns of light, then into darkness. Ahead waited new courts, new opponents, new lessons. But Manila would travel with her, just as it always had, woven into her footwork, her fight, her faith. This wasn't the end of a story. It was a return, a pause, a breath taken before the next rally. And somewhere between Australia and home, Eala had learned that progress doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes, it arrives quietly, like a plane touching down, carrying you back to where it all began, so you can leave again, stronger.